Hello and welcome to Policy Exchange's housing event for the Conservative Party conference with the NHBC. It's called Building Back Better, Quality and Quantity in House Building After Covid-19, and we have a very exciting lineup of speakers, including the Secretary of State for Housing. So after me, I'm Head of Housing, Transport and Urban Space at Policy Exchange. You will hear Lewis Sidnick, who's Director of Corporate Affairs at the NHBC. Then David Thomas, who's Group CEO of Barratt. Then Fiona Fletcher-Smith, who is Group Director for Development and Sales at L&Q, the large housing association. And then Kate Andrews, who's Economics Correspondent for the Spectator. And then finally, the Secretary of State, Robert Jenrick. So starting with me, the theme is quality and quantity in house building after COVID. I have two things to say about that. One is that I think there's a growing consensus, as shown in the planning white paper, where we're trying to get a workable compromise between interests, which involves bringing in local consent. And one of the things that's very important for local consent is build quality, both in terms of aesthetics and in terms of the house standing up, not burning down, and all things like that. I think that one interesting thing we've seen is with COVID, we're having to change the use of a lot of buildings, and we found that some buildings are much harder to change their use than others. For example, some big, tall glass blocks, we find it harder to switch their use from one use to another because of various features that make it hard, that make them well suited for being offices, say, but less well suited for being rooms if everyone can see into your rooms all the time. Whereas some Victorian buildings, because everything has access to the stairwell, because none of the walls are, most of the internal walls aren't load-bearing and so on, they're very easy to switch between uses. And I think this is one of the interesting lessons we're learning when we're shocked with massive shocks that we totally didn't expect, that totally change how we think about working and living and what we should use buildings in certain areas for. But as I said, we have an excellent panel, so I'm going to immediately shift over to much smarter and more knowledgeable people who are right in the action, starting with Lewis Sidnick.
Great, thank you very much, Ben. Thank you. We're delighted at NHBC to be hosting this event, and I thank Policy Exchange and the panel, particularly thank you to the Secretary of State for your time today. It's really appreciated. I think most of you will know who NHBC is, but for those watching who don't, briefly, we have a really exciting and broad role within the UK housing industry. On the construction side, we set technical standards. We don't build homes, but we set technical standards, and 80% of all homes in the UK are built according to NHBC's technical standards. And on the consumer side, we're an insurance company and we provide a 10-year warranty to homeowners, NHBC Build Mark warranty. So very briefly from me, 3 points, because we obviously want a discussion and debate and questions. The first point is on the market. There's been lots of media's commentary about the market is performing very well, and over the summer it's almost been bubbling away. And to some extent that's true, but where it's not true is on supply. The supply of new homes hasn't got back to normal levels or comparative levels to last year. NHBC registers homes on a daily basis, so we know how many homes were started as of yesterday. And the current latest data in the recent days and weeks is that it's still sort of 35 to 45% down on the same days and weeks last year. So the market's performing strong, but not on supply. There's still a long way to go to reach the pre-COVID levels. Number two, beyond COVID, NHBC is really supportive of a lot of government policy agenda that they've been pushing through, such as modern methods of construction, innovative construction, and we're really keen to see that focus remain during this difficult period. On MMC, we've just launched a product called NHBC Accepts to try and support the government and the industry have confidence in new ways of constructing new innovative ways. And we hope that the government remains focused on that. And on climate change, we've heard that the Prime Minister focused on that today and will be in his speech. We want to keep the focus on greener homes. Housing makes a massive contribution to the climate change problem. So remaining focused on that priority as well is really important. And on skills as well, NHBC provides thousands of days of training. We need to keep focused on making sure that young people are entering the market. So my second point is it's important to keep our focus on the broader policy agenda and support the government initiatives in that space. And thirdly and lastly from me, perhaps almost certainly the most important point, building safety. NHBC is the technical experts in the UK house building industry. Most homes are built to our standards, and we've been working with the Secretary of State's team on a daily basis for years since Grenfell to try and support making homes safer. And we really support the draft building safety legislation that will make a big improvement to safety. But there's still some problems with that legislation, some concerns that we have as the experts, and some possibility that homes could be less safe after the legislation, not more safe. So we're really keen to work with the Secretary of State and his officials in the final stages, and it's at draft stage, but to make the relevant changes so we can all deliver a package of measures that will make homes safe for everyone in the future. So for me, the 3 points, the market still a long way to go, 35 to 45% down on a daily basis in recent days, supply compared to the same days last year. Really keen to keep focusing on the broader initiatives, M&C, climate change skills, and on building safety, excellent package of measures, but still some concerns that we need to iron out in the final stages of the building safety bill. Thank you very much, Ben.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Lewis, so for those interesting comments. So I'm going to go immediately on to the opening remarks about the same length from David Thomas.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. So I'm the Chief Executive of Barratt. I think most people will know that we are one of the UK's largest house builders. We trade as 3 brands, Barratt Homes, David Wilson Homes, and also Barratt London. When you look at quantity, so in the year before COVID, we built and sold around 18,000 homes. We've been in business for just over 60 years. And during that period of time, we've built and sold more than 500,000 homes. In terms of looking at quality, we believe that we have got strong quality agendas. So when you look at the NHBC run an awards programme, and Barratt has won more NHBC Pride in the Job awards than any other house builder for the last 16 years. And our customers are asked to comment on our customer service and our service standards. And for the last 11 years, our customers have rated us at the highest level as a 5-star house builder. We also recognise that customers are looking for improved sustainability credentials from their homes. We're very committed to that sustainability agenda. We built the first carbon zero village in conjunction with Homes England at Hannam Hall in Bristol some 6 or 7 years ago. And we announced this year, as the first major house builder to do so, science-based targets for carbon reduction, which we think are key as we head towards a zero carbon environment. I think when you look at quality in terms of post-pandemic, we do recognise that the customer focus on housing has increased greatly. More and more people have spent a lot of time at home and continue to spend time at home. And whilst the fundamentals of location, the number of bedrooms and the price of the property are always going to remain as primary drivers, it's very, very clear that the customer is looking for more emphasis in terms of garden and green spaces. They're more focused in terms of energy efficiency because they're spending so much more time in their house. And they want to be able to access areas to walk and cycle paths. And we believe when you look at the way we present our developments to a Building for Life 12 standard, that we are very, very committed to providing these type of features to our developments. Biodiversity is clearly a key issue for the industry, a key issue for the country. And our partnership over the last few years with the RSPB has helped us to lead the way on that. The partnership has our 2,500 home flagship development just outside Aylesbury, and that featured in the government's 25-year plan as an exemplar site for nature-friendly developments. So we're very focused in terms of this quality agenda and how we can move forward through to 2030, building great quality, low carbon, low waste and high-tech homes. Just briefly on quantity, Lewis mentioned the position post the initial effects of COVID, and we are a long way behind our previous output levels. So calendar 19 output levels at around 19,000, calendar 20 output levels at around 12 or 13,000, so substantially down on a year-on-year basis. We're very focused on ensuring that we maintain our capacity, that we protect our people and we protect their employment. And we feel that the way to bounce back in terms of increased supply may well be about more partnerships between Homes England and the house builders, more partnerships with local authorities and housing associations and house builders. So we have strong partnerships with, for example, Swindon, with a 2,000 home development outside Swindon, and also strong partnerships with a number of housing associations. And finally, the need to build differently. So modern methods of construction, 20% of our homes are presently built using modern methods of construction. We expect that to increase to a quarter of our homes over the next few years, very much focused on alternative frame solutions. So looking at both timber frame and also large format block, which can give a much faster and more efficient construction method. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, David. So there we have David Thomas, and now it's going to be Fiona Fletcher-Smith. Over to you.
Thank you, Ben. So L&Q is one of the largest developing housing associations in the country. We've got a development programme over 5 billion, representing about 21,000 new homes. We build everywhere from the Lancashire-Cumbria borders down through the Midlands, East Anglia, down as far as Kent and London. But more importantly, we're more than a big developer. As with all housing associations, we are a regulated charitable organisation. And most important for us is the fact that we manage and look after 105,000 existing homes and are a landlord to about 250,000 people in Britain. We see ourselves as one of the great estates. We've been around since the early 60s. We want to be around for a few hundred years. And we want to work with local communities, local authorities, and the existing ecosystems of places so that we become the long-term curators and stewards of both the homes we own and manage, but also the places we create. And that's very important to us. Also, it's worth remembering that as a housing association, 100% of the profit we make is invested back into the business to look after the vulnerable people we house and to provide new quality homes for people who need them. And the fact that about 50% of my development programme is for sale is so that I can generate those profits to do the sort of work I've described. So what do we need to do differently now? So the National Federation of Housing last year published some figures that stated about 8 million people in Britain were inadequately housed in some way. And I think we can all guarantee that the pandemic hasn't made that any better. Those of us who were working from home or homeschooling really valued the additional and flexible space that our homes gave us. And something Ben said in his introduction really resonated with me, the ability to change the Victorian house from single family into multi-family, back to single family, and move it around as needs changed is something we need to carry in our heads. But L&Q are also dealing with fire safety issues. What has to change after the pandemic and what's had to change after Grenfell is we have to feel safe in our homes. It's absolutely vital. And as a Hackett early adopter, L&Q are moving at pace on that. But just to give you some context, the G15 group of housing associations operating in London have calculated that's going to cost about £6.9 billion. But we are ambitious to continue to be part of the answer to solve that. And we are ambitious to continue building new homes. We are known for our ambition to build 100,000 homes over the coming years. And in housing association world terms, to be as big as Barratt's is in the fully private sector. We're absolutely delighted with the Secretary of State's announcements on funding last month, and particularly delighted that there was a recognition that not everybody can afford to buy their own home, and that rented housing is an important aspect of what we need to build in Britain. Just to give you an example, our residents' average income is about £13,000 per year. So we just need to be mindful of that. We're also ambitious on carbon neutrality. And for example, we're part of a brilliant scheme with Barratt's, Innovate UK, Stuart Milne and the University of Dundee, where we're testing the boundaries of off-site manufacture, and particularly around reducing waste on site and a circular economy approach to how we build. So just to round up, what needs to change? Space is about more than simply living and existing. We need space to live properly and quality lives. We need space to breathe. We need access to green, safe, open space to exercise, and this is particularly important for families. We need access to broadband that actually works right across the country. We're all terribly conscious that this is an issue for rural Britain. It's also an issue for some of our big cities. And for example, areas of Rotherhithe in South London really struggle to get access to broadband that works. Jobs and training really, really matter. And I'm delighted that the Prime Minister is going to be saying something this morning about the green economy and how we can both achieve carbon neutrality, but also create some new jobs in that space. I would urge government, though, to join some policy dots, the policy dots of the country needing more housing, the policy dot of us needing some new jobs, and finally, that the climate emergency exists and is real. If you put those three things together, it really pushes you towards off-site manufacture. Finally, and most importantly, safety matters, and we need to continue the work. And I'm really happy that government is stepping into some of the policy issues that need to be firmed up and made certain for us all, so that we can keep our residents safe and keep building. And as always, you'd expect me to say this, L&Q and the housing association sector generally are here to help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona. I'm particularly interested in off-site manufacture and prefab, and I'm going to ask a question about that later using the privileges vested in me. But that means we now have Kate on next, Kate Andrews from The Spectator.
Thanks, Ben. I want to start off by noting that it's quite rare when you see something that isn't incremental policy change. Governments tend to move incrementally, but it's quite rare that you see a real shakeup. And I'm not sure we've given or paid enough lip service to really a spectacular shakeup of the planning system that has been announced and put into action over the past few months. It is some of the best news that Britain has had on the housing policy front for a long time, particularly great news to the younger generations struggling to get on the housing ladder. And this move to classifying growth, renewal, and protection simplifies things, it gets things moving, and hopefully it will get more homes built. And I start by saying that because, of course, then I'm going to dive into areas where I think we can do better and go further. But I think it has made a real difference. And of course, this virus has once again highlighted the severe intergenerational unfairness that the younger generations feel, especially when it comes to getting onto the housing ladder. You had people locked down, not leaving their homes, staying inside in group homes with extremely little space to themselves, often very little if not any outdoor space, and people in very difficult situations. You know, we hear about that lockdown divide, about those who had a delightful time staying at home and those who really struggled. But the people who really struggled often were in a situation where their home, for one reason or another, just wasn't fit for what we had to do back in the spring. And I think this is a reminder, as other panelists have said, that we certainly need to address supply. And I think there are a few more areas where the government can go further to really make sure that what they've done, the changes that they've made so far, can be most acutely felt and capitalized on. And the first I would say is we need to get rid of the loopholes that still exist that allow councils in particular to block permitted development rights. I'm thinking of the Article 4 directions. It needs to be possible to take a space, especially as we recover from this COVID crisis, that is no longer being used for offices or other kinds of accommodation, and turn that area into houses and flats. And unfortunately, especially in very popular areas where people want to live, like around the city centers, you see that certain councils almost see it as a point of pride. I won't name names, but I'm sure you can find them. See it as a point of pride to push back on these developments that would enable there to be more accommodation and more housing. And that's something that needs to be tackled. The second thing I would say, and I know it's politically very difficult for the Conservative Party to do this, but it's Digital Conservative Party Conference. This is the time to say it. As we're all speaking to the grassroots as well as the politicians, we still do need to address the green belt and go further, especially here in England. We're talking about a very small percentage of the green belt in the southeast, under 4%, that could be built on, all within walking distance of a rail station or some kind of transport hub that could transform the housing market. And it's not just about building the homes, but making sure that those homes are built where people want to live. Again, it all goes back to COVID this week, I suppose, at this conference, but the virus has changed what people want out of their homes. It's changed where they want to live. And we need this to be an organic process. We need homes developed where people are wanting to live and fit for the purposes that they might want to have if they're now working from home more often, commuting less, spending more time at home. And that's going to be very difficult for the government to centrally manage or plan. That has to happen at the grassroots level, at the local level, and it has to be driven by what people really want now. And then the third thing I'd say, as we do build more homes, and as we look back on the new homes that have recently been built, and as we talk about safety standards, as has come up a lot in this discussion so far, we need to recognize that there have also been some very serious problems with the way that safety standards have been quite quickly changed, especially at the beginning of this year, and the cladding scandal that has now arisen from that. It's now estimated that over 11,000 new builds, over 600,000 people have been affected by changes coming through the external wall fire review that have retrospectively changed these standards. And leaseholders in particular are looking at possibly being slapped with tens of thousands of pounds in bills to upgrade their homes that are no longer deemed safe. Safety is obviously the top priority, but we cannot punish those who went through the government schemes, who did exactly what they were told to purchase these new builds, possibly go into shared ownership to get themselves on the housing ladder. It was sold as their opportunity, their shot to become a homeowner, to start saving, to start thinking about their finances in a real way, and they can't be punished for having done so, especially if we're retrospectively deciding that standards have changed. So whilst we think about the buildings that need to be built in the future, we cannot leave behind those who might objectively from a distance seem like they're the lucky ones who've made it work, but unfortunately because of the situation and the building situations over the past few years are actually in a very difficult financial place. So I'll wrap it up there, Ben, and hand it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Kate. Some very interesting points there. And finally, we move on to our final speaker, the Secretary of State, Robert Jenrick. So there we go. I'll hand over.
Hi, well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much to Policy Exchange and NHBC for hosting this. I know Policy Exchange has been a brilliant champion for these issues for so long and has helped to contribute a great deal to the work that we've been bringing forward over the last few months. This is Conservative Party Conference, as I have to start by saying that, to me, the central mission of the Conservative Party is to spread opportunity to as many people as possible. And there are a few better ways to do that than to help them to secure a safe and attractive home that they can put down roots, invest for their future, ensure that their family is well provided for, and become part of a community. Home ownership is more than just four walls and a roof. It's about so much more than that. And that really is why we need to be taking this issue seriously. And the Conservative Party needs to view this as being absolutely integral to its mission. I think the Conservative Party has always prospered when it's been building homes. It did so under Harold Macmillan, it did so under Margaret Thatcher, and the Prime Minister and I hope and believe it can do so again under this Conservative administration. I think that the recent few weeks and months under COVID has only demonstrated that once again, as Kate and others have said in this introduction. It's demonstrated the fundamental importance to all of us of a home. It's shown the intergenerational unfairnesses. We've all, I think those of us in the workplace have all seen people who are younger than me working at home on the end of a Zoom call, often sitting on a bed or in a shared apartment. That isn't right. We want to help the next generation onto the housing ladder. We want to enable those young people to get homes of their own. And the pandemic has also shown people on very low incomes or very vulnerable people living in substandard accommodation who have had a significantly more difficult experience than those of us who are lucky to live in spacious homes with gardens or to live in the countryside. So whether it's to help young people or to help the most vulnerable in society, we need now to seize this moment and build more homes in all parts of the country of all tenures and to enable more people to access them. And that's exactly what we intend to do. We've taken some steps already, as some of you have already alluded to. We took through a series of, I think, quite radical steps at the beginning of the summer through permitted development rights to enable people to build upwards on their home, to change use class, something long overdue in this country, so that you could change hairdressers into a cafe, into a yoga studio, into a retail shop, giving the flexibility that small business people need. And if there isn't a good use for that property, then absolutely to turn it into housing and to breathe new life into town and city centres as a result. We also brought forward a right to regenerate, which enables you to take a derelict or disused building and again to knock it down and turn it into the houses that we desperately need. And then we published our planning reforms at the beginning of August, which are now being consulted on, which will come towards the end of the consultation period. And we hope to be responding and then legislating for those next year. And that will be one of the most significant changes to our planning system since it was created in its modern form in the 1940s. And that really has at its heart trying to unite the two seemingly contradictory forces, which are the title of this discussion, quantity and quality. How can we build substantially more properties in this country in the places where people most want to live, whilst at the same time ensuring that there is a step change in terms of quality? And we view that in terms of beauty and design. We view it in terms of sustainability and environmental standards. And we also view it in terms of safety and building standards. And in each of those lenses, through each of those lenses, we want to improve the types of homes that are being built in this country very significantly. We've set out our proposals. Kate and Lewis and others have alluded to them. I'm very happy to answer questions on them. I think together this is actually quite a radical agenda and an extremely important one. A government, particularly a government like ours, which has been fortunate to be elected with an 80-strong majority, albeit one which has now been put into a very challenging situation by the events of the COVID pandemic, must have at its heart ambitious supply-side reforms which help to set up the country for a brighter future. And this is one of them, which is why it's extremely important now that we get on and deliver it. I do fundamentally believe that we can build more homes and ensure that they are better quality homes, that build public support for house building, and that we will do that by having the types of reforms that we've set out, but also more investment in affordable homes, in council homes, in social housing. You know, this is not picking one side of the debate. If we're going to build more homes, we need to be building more of all types and tenures. It's not just building in the southeast, it's also going to be about building significantly more in some of the core cities in the Midlands and the North, some of which have smaller populations today than they did in 1979. We have to change that, and that means, as Fiona said, aligning the housing agenda with other things as well, like skills, with climate, like levelling up. And that's, again, exactly what we want to do as a government. And recognising, I think also, that we are seeing some of the most substantial changes in our town and city centres, not just in our lifetimes, but probably since the Second World War, if not since the advent of the motor car, when urban areas had to be adapted So we have to seize that and bring forward some quite significant and radical changes if we want to ensure that we're building homes and we're helping urban areas as well to adapt and evolve to an unprecedented set of changes. That's what we intend to do, and I'd love to have your support as we try to take forward this agenda, and happy to answer any questions along with the rest of the panel.
Thank you very much. I thought that across our panel we had extremely interesting range of comments on lots of different issues, so I suspect we'll have lots of questions coming through. I can already see some on the screen, but since I have the privilege of being the chair, that means I can stop any question I don't want to have coming through, and I can make my own questions whenever I like. And I'm going to start with asking all of the panel, anyone who wants to give an opinion on this. I spent the other day, because I'm a housing nerd, that's what I do as a job, I spent the other day going through a long website where German companies were selling prefab houses. And obviously this is a known thing. In some countries they have lots of prefab houses. You can go on the internet, you can buy yourself a 200 square metre house that's pretty good for 40,000 euros. If you want a really fancy, excellent pastiche of the medieval era or something, you might spend £1 million on that. But you can get a decent 3-bedroom house for 40,000 euros. And if you have the land, which obviously is completely another question, but if you had the land, you can put it up. But it seems to me, and these much more knowledgeable people on the panel will know much better about this, but it seems to me we don't do much of this in this country. Even when house builders themselves are building, they're doing it, much of it on site. Is that true? Am I mistaken here? And should we shift to this other equilibrium? And if we did want to shift there, how should we do it? And I know that pretty much everyone on the panel will know more about this than me, so I'm asking it to all of you.
Will I start, Ben?
Please.
I think the word prefab has become kind of emotional, and in people's minds it means temporary, it means low quality, it's the kind of thing you shove up as a site office. We need to move away from that. If anybody knows Piccadilly, there's a brand new Lang O'Rourke British land building on Piccadilly, which is absolutely beautiful. The whole thing was prefabricated and made in a factory near the Secretary of State's constituency. It's in Worksop, and put together. It looks amazing. It looks absolutely brilliant. We have placed an order for about 1,500 homes with Stuart Milne, a closed panel timber frame company from Scotland, who have been building these homes in Scotland for 40 or 50 years. So they're doing brilliantly. But for me, there are 3 things that come out of MMC, 4 things actually. Quality, it can be manufactured in a factory and overseen properly, and it's done in the dry and the warm. Anybody who does a building site knows to check very carefully any work that was done in lunchtime on a Friday. That's not the situation in a factory. Cost, it's more efficient, less wasteful, and therefore carbon neutrality is so much easier to achieve because you're doing the same process over and over again. But an interesting side to it is issues of equality and diversity. I spend a lot of time trying to encourage people to come into construction as a career. It's seen as horrible, cold, wet, muddy. We can have factories running on shift patterns that allow people with caring responsibilities to work around school pickups or whatever your caring responsibility is, for example, and we can encourage a lot more people into the industry. So that, and my plea is we need people like Homes England to keep doing what they're doing and keep guaranteeing the pipeline of new homes so the new entrants to the market can make that investment. One of the things that Lang O'Rourke have always told me is that because they're basing themselves in the Midlands, they are taking a lot of expertise that is potentially redundant from the car manufacturing industry and moving it into housing. It is a factory process. It's brilliant. You can tell I'm a
fan. Great. Well, David, did you want to, or Lewis, did you want to comment on this? You don't have to if you don't want to, but I'm sure we'd be interested in your insights. Otherwise,
I'll comment. I'm sorry,
please, yeah.
David, and then you. I saw you take your microphone off. So we, NHBC really supports MMC, innovative construction, really behind the government's drive to get more homes built. I think we agree completely with what Fiona just said. I think that the final missing ingredient, why have we not built more homes using innovative construction? I think it's the word confidence. I think the industry and maybe homeowners haven't had confidence that innovative construction will be high quality. You know, sometimes you think better the devil you know, maybe. And that's what NHBC is trying to address. We've launched NHBC Accepts to provide confidence to the industry that our technical experts, we've got over 1,000 staff at NHBC, that they've checked these systems, that we have confidence that it will be high quality and we accept it, NHBC Accept. So hopefully with this now, that will help open the way for more innovative construction, because it will deliver what the title of this event is about. It will deliver more quantity and better quality. So we're fully behind it.
Looks like, did you want to have a comment, Robert, Jenrick?
Yeah, thanks. Just to say, the government is hugely supportive of this. Both myself, the Chancellor, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury. So we want this to be a significant part of our future housing investment plans, and indeed of the spending review later this year. We've made it a condition of our £12 billion affordable homes programme that at least 20% of those homes should be manufactured through modern methods. And I added that we would then review that every year. And if market conditions allow, we will up that percentage so that we keep pushing to go further. And I think if we are able to do any further investments, then I would like them to be the majority MMC in the years ahead. For all the reasons I think Fiona set out very eloquently, this is so important. It's a complete alignment of all our objectives, really, isn't it? It's skills. It helps to tackle some of our labour shortage issues as we're leaving the European Union, so we don't have to import so much labour. It does seem to have a very significant impact on the equalities and the gender issues that the industry has suffered from in the past. Just a different type of person is often interested in working in an indoor environment. I don't mean that from a gender perspective, but it does attract different people who want to work indoors. Some of these skills they're much more highly skilled or differently skilled. They can be like tech and digital skills as well. And on the quality and building safety side, I think there's a real opportunity there because these homes will become more and more sophisticated products. Building safety defects of the kinds that we have seen in recent years are going to be much less likely to happen. We do need to make sure that the design is attractive, but that will come as more homes are brought forward, and that homes that are constructed under MMC aren't just perceived to be sort of anywheresville generic properties. We want to be able to give them a local character as well, but I think that's entirely possible as we get the industry going. The role for government, I think, here is trying to get the skills base right, trying to educate more people in this. We're investing in some great organisations and institutions like the one in Wolverhampton, which is just opening to drive skills. But also, as Fiona said, trying to give a guaranteed pipeline so that businesses like Lang O'Rourke in Worksop have the confidence to go and build factories, create jobs, and get going. And that's exactly what I would like to do in the years ahead.
Great, thank you. Well, before I roll on to the next question, I just wanted to chastise you. You listed some excellent Conservative house builders in history, Margaret Thatcher, Macmillan, but you didn't list the #1 best, greatest ever house builder in British history, Neville Chamberlain, who created the world. Maybe his foreign policy wasn't perfect, but his house building policy was so great that the greatest rate in both numbers and percentage terms, and there was even a song that went to #1 with "God Bless You, Mr. Chamberlain," because he built so many houses. And so I'm hoping that next year we get so many houses built that we have "God Bless You, Mr. Jenrick" as #1 at Christmas time. But I will roll on to the next question, which is about size and amenity. So this is from one of the audience, and the question is, if more people will be working from home following COVID, will we need to see larger homes with more amenity spaces, larger gardens? And if so, how do we achieve specifically this? Who'd like to comment on that one?
Well, Ben,
we've got Robert Jenrick popping in, and then then Kate can go after that.
I'll just say briefly, I do think this is important, and it was one of the things that has come out of COVID. It was one of the reasons that influenced me to change the law so that our PDRs are now subject to minimum space standards. I don't think it's right that rabbit hutch homes are created. We do need to think more carefully about the quality and the size of homes that are being built in this country, so that we could all be proud to think that we're creating them on our watch. I do think we will now need to think about people working from home more, and that means broadband as well as just space. And I'm interested in whether we can adapt our PDRs, for example, to make both of those things guaranteed for all new homes coming forward in this country. And access to outdoor space, I think, is going to be even more important. I've already said that we want it to be the law that you have to have tree-lined streets, and I think there's probably more that we can do in that respect, so that people have ready access to playgrounds and outdoor space as well. Of course, there's always a tension between the state determining these things like size and the number of homes that you can build. And I think we have to remember that, because it's easy sometimes to be making requirements on properties where they're selling for very high prices. But remember, in this country, in large parts of the country, or we as a government want to be building homes, like in the Midlands and the North, some homes are barely viable today on the current economics. So every time you come up with a new and compelling idea, it just adds cost and makes it more difficult for people to get on the housing ladder. So we will continue to weigh those things up carefully each time we consider a new proposition. But I do think it was the right thing to do to change the space standards, so that those very small homes that were giving PDRs, which I think is a great policy, a bad name, that we fixed that so that we move forward in a better position.
So that means I'll move on to Kate.
Well, now that we do have those minimum standards, it goes back to something I mentioned in my opening remarks, that there really is no reason not to be transforming spaces that are no longer going to be used for businesses or retail or whatever it may be. Now that that guidance and that structure is set out, and you can't go too small, there's no reason not to be adapting it. I would just note that having outdoor space was something that people highly valued before the COVID crisis. That's not particularly new, and it speaks to the need for many of the different things that we want out of our homes now, including possibly the opportunity to be more comfortable working from home, have to be weighed into these decisions. But I don't think it's just about size. I think it's also about flexibility within one's home to restructure and to change things around if you're going to, say, prioritize an office space over a spare bedroom, and what you might like to do to that space. So again, just making it as easy as possible, really, for the homeowner, once they get in there, or perhaps are already in a home that they've been in for 20 years, making it very easy for them to change the space, I think is key. It matters, in my opinion, just as much, if not more, than size.
Looks like David.
Yeah, if I could just echo that. I think in terms of trends for downstairs space in houses over the last couple of decades, we've seen far more open plan living. So kitchen, lounge, dining room and spaces being opened up. And I think one of the things that people have found in working from home environments is that open space is not necessarily conducive to that. So I'm not sure it's necessarily about more space, which I think we would all recognise that more space costs more money. I think it's more about, as Kate touched on, the flexibility of the space. I think is very, very important. And we're already seeing that starting to come through in terms of customer viewings and customer inquiries, where they're looking for that flexibility of space. Just two other points. One, we're very much in favour of space standards. And I think we would prefer a space standard for set on a national level rather than being set on a local level. But of course, we're in favour of space standards. I think it gives everyone a level playing field, and everyone understands where they are. And green spaces and more planting of trees are hugely important. Something we've been, as a business, I'm sure many other house builders as well, very, very focused on. In terms of planting of trees, something that our customers very much want to see. A slight negative, not necessarily something that local authorities want to see in street scenes because of the maintenance costs, and that is a real issue for local authorities, I believe.
Thanks. Did Lewis? Is that you looking to comment on it?
Just make one point of that from a, but we support what David just said, that we can see in some of our work that people are clearly changing their preferences, and space is even bigger. It was big before and it's even bigger now in COVID. And from a personal perspective, I'm a good case study. I have a flat in central London with no outdoor space that I've sold. I'm moving out on Thursday and buying a house outside of London with a garden. So I'm a living proof of this change. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, I believe Kate has to leave now, so thank you very much, Kate. I have another question coming up here, which I can't quite see because of thank you. Oh, now they've blocked it. I have excellent helpers here. So here's another question. This is, I assume, a question to an intriguing question. Is build quality overrated? Should we encourage a cultural shift to the Japanese system, where we simply demolish our houses every 30 to 50 years and build new ones to sort of give us a constant spirit of moving forwards with the times? I imagine people are going to say no, but I'm interested if you were suddenly converted. David?
I think our customers, when they buy their house, I think expect their house to last for a minimum of 250 years. I mean, we actually sent a team over going back 5 or 6 years ago, and they spent some time with Sekisui in Japan, who are building modular homes. I mean, I would just say it's a very, very different market. I mean, disproportionately high land costs, even relative to the UK. And therefore, houses being built with an expectation of life of 30, 40, 50 years is the norm. But I don't think that's for the UK market.
Mm-hmm. So houses to last for the UK market. I don't see anyone else jumping to intervene. Go on, Fiona, please, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's something I said in my opening remarks. You've always got to work with the grain of the place. And for me, Britain is about the history. It is about buildings that last thousands of years. It's one of the reasons we attract tourists, surely. So this disposable idea of housing really doesn't fit with me at all. We've got to build to last. We absolutely have. And I'm sure if one of our concerns about planning reform is how do we engage with local communities about what we're going to build? If we're saying to them, I'm going to shove this up for 15, 20 years and, you'll just have to put up with it, I'm not sure that's going to gain that trust from local communities that we so desperately need.
Thank you, Fiona. So I have more questions coming up.
I just think I'm in agreement with Fiona and David on this. I think our built heritage is one of the greatest assets of this country. As Fiona said, people all over the world love and admire us for the buildings that previous generations left us. So we have to be building with an expectation that these homes are going to last. I do also think, though, that there's going to be a big opportunity to demolish some of the mistakes of the recent past, because you do see quite a lot of empty, derelict buildings in town and city centres that were put up, often poorly constructed, not within the character of those places, particularly in market towns in the 60s and 70s. And that's one of the reasons why we brought forward our permitted development right for regeneration. But we're going to be underpinning that with design codes so that local people this time around can actually decide what do they want these buildings to look like, which are often so central to their lives because they're key buildings within their town or city centre. And so locally popular architecture, which I think Policy Exchange has done a lot to promote over the years, is going to be absolutely at the heart of the planning reforms we're bringing forwards.
Well, thank you very much, because you've segued into my next point based on a question I can see up here. So one of the key priorities of Policy Exchange, and also of the government, as you see in the Planning White Paper, is devoting a lot of space to talking about building beautiful, which doesn't seem to have been a priority of many previous governments over the last 50 or 60 years. And one question we've got here plays right into this. So they say VAT on new build is 0, but on refurbs 20. This encourages knocking down old buildings that could be repurposed. Is this sensible for both sustainability and beauty reasons? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Should we have the same rate of VAT on refurbs and new builds, or is there a reason for new builds to attract a lower rate of VAT, 20% lower, 20 percentage points lower? Is anyone on the panel like to comment on that? David, that looks like you've got. Oh, and David, then Fiona.
Well, I think really, for me, I suppose it's more a commentary about the overall market. So, I think new build has had let's say an exemption of zero rated status, because second hand has a zero rated status. Whereas if you're refurbing the house, it's generally seen to be fairly incidental, and therefore you have VAT applying. But I think probably more intrusive decision for the Chancellor.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. Fiona, go on, if you had more to add to that.
Just going back to something the Secretary of State said earlier, the importance of regeneration and looking at our town centres. So there probably is a real argument for a level playing field on this, because there are some, rubbish buildings, frankly, in town centres, but also, I'm not sure I totally agree with what Kate Greenbelt. We need to encourage people to go back and look at reusing land in some way. So possibly this even playing field would encourage that in some way.
Yep. Did anyone else want to? I can't see everyone's face on my version of the screen, so I can't always tell if someone's going to want to speak. I can't see anyone else unmuting themselves, so I'm going to assume that that you don't want to comment on this question, but I have another question, so it's okay. In Germany, every home is built with a basement. Given the requirements for a home office in this new state, is it sensible that we should make it easier or even make it standard to have basements in every new house? What do you think about that? Anyone want to comment on that? Go on, Fiona. I'm
a massive fan of basements as well. I live in a house that sold itself on the basement because I have children, and this is going to sound slightly odd, but locking them in the basement, not quite locking them, but that's an amazing space for them. We have playroom there. It's just fantastic, and storage. It's wonderful. But we do need to recognise there are cost implications with doing that. But yeah, in America, it's normal to have a basement. Victorian houses had basements. Yeah, it's definitely something to explore. And in terms of its impact on a conservation area, the fact that I will be doing work to my basement, not in a giant swimming pool, 6-car garage kind of way, but in a very small way to get some more light in, doesn't really impinge on my neighbours when I do that work, but I'm creating more space.
Well, that's that reminds me of something I was doing the other day, which was browsing Rightmove for the most expensive bungalow in London, and I found this bungalow, and it was £1.7 million, and I was stunned. So I clicked on this bungalow to discover what it was about this bungalow that made it so expensive, and in fact, it was a pretty standard bungalow, but it had planning permission to build this incredible villain's lair underneath, where there were 2 stories of basement, including an automatic car lift, and almost quadruple the size of the plot underground. Now, of course, I suspect that if we do have interesting planning reforms along the lines that we're expecting, it will stop being economic to dig down 2 stories and build a villain's lair. However, it does show you that even though you don't get natural light, and there are lots of uses for extra land in places where it's extremely scarce. I wonder if anyone else has a comment on basement, or I will ask what I think will be the final question after that. Okay. Actually, let's go straight to closing remarks. If everyone wants to give a quick, we only have 5 more minutes, so if everyone wanted to give 1-minute summary of what they think the most important take-home about COVID-19 and building more quality and more quantity afterwards is, and I'll say thank you to everyone. So let's do the same order as before. So Lewis, you go first.
That's great. Thank you. No, I'll just close by just focusing on perhaps the biggest point for NHBC, which is building safety. And we fully support the draft legislation that the Secretary of State is bringing through Parliament. But we've got a concern that the new regulator being created under Health and Safety Executive is going to have a default guidance that it has to choose local authority to deliver building control, which is checking compliance with building regulation. We don't think there should be a default preference. We think that the regulators should choose the best available body to deliver building control for that specific development. So it's a really important point to get right in the Building Safety Bill. But apart from that, it's a great set of measures that will help deliver safer homes, which everyone wants. And can I just add my thanks again to Policy Exchange and the panel and the Secretary of State today. Great debate, great discussion, great questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lewis. And then I'll push on to David, your summary remarks.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to stay very focused in terms of the quality agenda. So both in terms of the physical build quality, but also looking at what we're doing in terms of customer service and what we're doing in terms of sustainability. I mean, we see those as being absolutely key. We recognise that quantity has a role, and as one of the largest house builders, we want to increase our capacity, but that is going to take time in a post-COVID environment.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being on the panel, David. Then I'll lead on to Fiona.
Thanks, Ben. Well, apart from the takeaway that I thought I was a housing geek until I heard some of your discussions about Chamberlain, and there was actually a song. So I'm going to go and have to look that up after this. But just some keywords as takeaways: safety, quality, space, internal and external really matters. The climate absolutely matters. And if we bring this all together nationally under a rebooted industrial strategy, we can really start to hit some of those key priorities for the country of jobs, climate and safety and quality through off-site manufacture and encouraging that business model. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona, and thank you for being on the panel. And then finally, as promised, you once again get the last word, and the last minute and a half of time is yours, Secretary of State.
Thank you very much. Well, I think it's been a very interesting discussion for me, and I'll take heart from your reminder about Neville Chamberlain. He was briefly the most popular politician in the country because he built a lot of homes. And I hope that for colleagues across the Conservative Party, we can see that this is an absolutely integral part of the moral mission of being a Conservative, and that the times are ripe for quite radical answers. COVID and the economic disruption that flows with it means that we do need to have a planning system which has the flexibility at its heart to enable us to respond to these challenges, to reimagine town and city centres, to build more homes, but also, as we've heard today, to do so in a way which is high quality, safe, environmentally friendly and locally popular. And I think those things are possible to do, and that's exactly what we're going to set out to achieve over the course of the months ahead. But thank you very much to Policy Exchange for your tremendous support for us.
Thank you very much, everyone. And now we're all going to tune into the PM's conference speech. So see you there. Cheers.